It's a pretty specific question and one that gets people thinking about history and how stories change over time. You asked if a famous female sharpshooter, Annie Oakley, was pardoned by the Queen of England. And the simple direct answer to that is no, she wasn't. There's no record, no historical evidence at all that Annie Oakley ever needed a pardon, let alone received one from the Queen of England. It's a myth, one of those interesting bits of folklore that sometimes sticks to famous people. But that Plano doesn't really tell you much about Annie Oakley or why such a story might even exist. So let's unpack that a bit. Annie Oakley was a huge celebrity in her day, a genuine superstar. She traveled the world, met important people, and amazed audiences with her skill. And because she was so famous, because her life was so unusual for a woman of her time, it makes sense that people might invent or exaggerate stories about her. Her real life was exciting enough, though, without needing any added fiction. The idea of Annie Oakley, a sharp-shooting American woman, needing a pardon from the British Queen is quite a vivid image. It suggests some kind of trouble, a brush with the law, or perhaps a grand gesture from royalty. But when you look at Annie Oakley's actual life, none of that lines up. She was known for her honesty, her professionalism, and her wholesome image. She was a performer, yes, but not a troublemaker in any sense that would require a royal pardon. So, where does a story like this come from? Well, famous people often attract tall tales. Think about it. When someone becomes a legend, like Annie Oakley did, their true story can sometimes get mixed up with things people wish were true, or things that simply make for a better story. Her fame was global. She was one of the most recognized women in the world, and she definitely performed for royalty, including Queen Victoria of England. That much is true. But performing for royalty and needing a pardon are two very different things. Annie Oakley's real name was Phoebe Ann Mosey. She was born in Ohio in 1860. Her childhood was not easy at all. Her family was very poor. Her father died when she was young. Her mother struggled to provide for the children. Annie, as she became known, started shooting at a very young age. She did it out of necessity. She hunted game to feed her family, and she became incredibly good at it. This wasn't just a hobby. It was a way to survive. And it was this skill developed in the harsh realities of a challenging life that would eventually make her famous. She learned to shoot with incredible precision. She could hit targets that most people couldn't even see clearly. She had an amazing talent, an almost natural ability to handle a gun with grace and accuracy. And it wasn't just about hitting a target, it was about how she did it. She was quick, smooth, and made it look effortless. People were drawn to this. It was something truly special. Her journey from a poor farm girl in Ohio to an international star is remarkable. She started performing in local shooting contests. She met Frank Butler, a fellow shooter, at one of these contests. She beat him, actually. They fell in love and got married. Frank recognized her extraordinary talent. He became her manager and partner. He helped her develop her act. He saw that she wasn't just a good shot, she was a captivating performer. Together, they started touring, performing their shooting act for audiences across the country. This was the beginning of Annie Oakley, the public figure. She wasn't born into fame or privilege. She earned every bit of it through hard work, dedication, and a truly unique skill. And she did it in a time when most women were expected to stay home, not perform on stage with firearms. This alone made her stand out. She broke barriers without even trying, just by being herself and following her talent. Her big break came when she joined Buffalo Bill's Wild West show. This show was enormous. It was a huge spectacle, a traveling circus of cowboys, Native American performers, and amazing acts. It toured all over the United States, and then famously it went to Europe. And it was there, in Europe, that Annie Oakley would encounter royalty. But again, to be clear, encountering royalty is not the same as being pardoned by them. The idea of a pardon implies a wrongdoing, a crime, something serious that needed forgiveness from the highest authority. Annie Oakley lived a life largely free of scandal or criminal accusations. Her public image was always wholesome, modest, and patriotic. She was seen as a symbol of American skill and ingenuity. So, the story of a royal pardon just doesn't fit with who she was or what she represented to people. It's a dramatic idea, for sure, but not one rooted in the facts of her life. Annie Oakley's path to international stardom was fast when she joined Buffalo Bill's Wild West show in 1885. This was a massive undertaking. More than just a show, it was an experience. It brought the idea of the American West to people who had never seen it. And Annie Oakley was a central part of that. She was often called Little Sure Shot by Sitting Bull himself, the famous Native American leader, who was also part of the show for a time. That nickname stuck with her. Her act was incredible. She could shoot a dime tossed into the air. She could shoot the ash off a cigarette held in her husband, Frank's mouth. She could shoot backwards using a mirror. She could even shoot a playing card edgewise and put several holes in it before it hit the ground. She did all of this with an impressive calmness and precision. People were absolutely amazed. It was skill, yes, but also showmanship. She knew how to present her talent in a way that captivated audiences. The Wild West show was not just popular in America, it was a sensation in Europe. In 1887, Buffalo Bill's Wild West show crossed the Atlantic for Queen Victoria's Golden Jubilee celebrations. This was a huge deal. It was a chance for the show and its performers to show off American culture and skill to European audiences and to royalty. They performed for crowned heads, nobles, and huge crowds of common people. Annie Oakley performed for many important people during these tours. She truly was a global celebrity, and yes, she performed for Queen Victoria. This is a well-documented fact. The Queen was reportedly very impressed by Annie's shooting display. Imagine this young American woman standing confidently, shooting with such accuracy, right in front of the monarch of one of the world's most powerful empires. It must have been quite a sight. But this performance for Queen Victoria, while a highlight of Annie's career, had nothing to do with a pardon. It was simply a performance, a demonstration of skill for an appreciative audience, albeit a very important one. There was no crime committed, no misdeed to forgive. Annie Oakley was there as an entertainer, not as someone seeking clemency. The European tours were incredibly successful. The show visited England, France, Italy, and other countries. Annie Oakley met kings, queens, princes, and emperors. She even taught some of them how to shoot a bit. It's said that she offered to shoot an apple off the head of Kaiser Wilhelm II of Germany, but he declined. This was before he became the Kaiser, who would lead Germany into World War I, of course. It's a famous anecdote that shows how confident she was and how impressive her skills were. And her fame wasn't just about her shooting, it was also about her personality. She was modest, polite, and always impeccably dressed. She projected an image of wholesome American womanhood, despite her unusual profession. She was a role model for many. She showed that a woman could be strong, independent, and incredibly skilled without losing her femininity. She broke gender stereotypes long before it was a common idea. Annie and Frank were a team. Their partnership was key to her success. Frank handled the business side, the logistics, and also performed with her. Their marriage was a strong one, lasting for over 50 years. The stability and loving relationship also contributed to her steady, positive public image. She wasn't a scandal-ridden star. She was respected and admired. So when thinking about the idea of a royal pardon, it's important to remember Annie's character and her public persona. She lived a life that was above reproach, at least publicly. She was a hard worker, a devoted wife, and a patriotic American. The kind of person who would need a royal pardon just doesn't fit with the Annie Oakley that history remembers and that her contemporaries knew. Her story is one of rising from poverty through pure talent and hard work, not one of escaping some legal trouble with royal intervention. Her real story is much more inspiring and impressive than any made-up tale of a pardon. The connection between Annie Oakley and England is strong because of Buffalo Bill's Wild West show's tours. The show first came to England in 1887, a year that marked Queen Victoria's Golden Jubilee. This was a huge national celebration, and the arrival of the Wild West show was a major event. It brought a piece of exotic Americana to British shores. The show performed for massive crowds at Earl's Court in London. And, as mentioned, they famously performed for Queen Victoria herself. This wasn't just a casual meeting. It was a command performance, a special event where the Queen and many members of the royal family and nobility watched the show. Annie Oakley was naturally one of the star attractions. There are accounts of Queen Victoria being quite charmed by Annie Oakley's skill and demeanor. It's easy to imagine. A young woman, small in stature but with immense presence, demonstrating such incredible control over firearms. It must have been captivating. Her ability to shoot the pips out of playing cards or split a lead bullet on a knife edge were demonstrations of almost unbelievable precision. However, historical records, biographies of Annie Oakley, and accounts of the Wild West show's British tours all confirm that while Annie Oakley performed for Queen Victoria, there was absolutely no mention or hint of a pardon. A royal pardon is a very specific legal and political act. It's not something that happens casually. It requires a crime, a conviction, or at least an accusation of a crime, and Annie Oakley simply wasn't involved in anything like that. What would necessitate a royal pardon? Well, a pardon is an act of forgiveness or clemency. It typically means that someone has been found guilty of a crime or is accused of one, and the sovereign, the Queen, in this case, decides to officially excuse them from the legal consequences or the punishment. It's a very formal process, usually reserved for serious situations. It's not given out for being a good shot or for charming a monarch. Annie Oakley's life was remarkably free of controversy, especially the kind that would lead to criminal charges. She was a performer, an entertainer. Her job was to thrill audiences, not to break laws. She was known for her honesty and integrity. The image she projected and the life she lived were far removed from any sort of criminal enterprise or legal entanglement that would put her in a position to need a pardon. Think about the context of the time. In the late 19th century, a woman, especially one in the public eye, would have faced intense scrutiny. Any whisper of scandal or criminal activity would have been hugely damaging to her career and reputation. For Annie Oakley, who maintained a spotless public image for decades, the idea of a secret crime or legal issue that the Queen then pardoned is simply inconsistent with everything we know about her. The Wild West Show's tours in England were a huge success. They helped solidify Annie Oakley's status as an international star. She was admired for her skill, her professionalism, and her wholesome appeal. The British press, which could be quite critical, was largely very positive about her. She was seen as a credit to American womanhood. So, while the British connection is a real and important part of Annie Oakley's story, the pardon part is purely fictional. It's a bit of embroidery added to an already fascinating life. Perhaps it comes from a misunderstanding or a romanticized idea of what it means to meet royalty. Maybe someone heard she met the Queen, and then through repeated telling, it morphed into something more dramatic, like a pardon. Well, but the facts just don't support it. Annie Oakley performed for the Queen, but she never asked for or received a pardon. Her presence in England was about entertainment, not about legal troubles. Let's talk a bit more about what a pardon really means. In most legal systems, including the British system, a pardon is a declaration of forgiveness or clemency. It's usually issued by the head of state, the monarch, the president, or a governor, and it effectively remits punishment for a crime. It can sometimes restore rights that were lost due to a conviction, but the key thing is there has to be a crime. There has to be something to pardon. Annie Oakley was not accused of any crimes. She was not put on trial. She was not convicted. So the very premise of her needing a pardon is missing. A pardon isn't just a handshake or a nod from a queen because she liked your show. It's a formal, legal act with serious implications. Why do these kinds of stories, these historical misconceptions, take hold? Well, there are a few reasons. One is simply the passage of time. As generations pass, details can get fuzzy. Oral traditions, especially, can change and embellish stories with each retelling. Facts get blended with fiction. Another reason is the allure of drama. Sharpshooter meets Queen is interesting. Sharpshooter pardoned by Queen for mysterious crime is much more dramatic, even if it's completely made up. People love a good story, and sometimes accuracy takes a backseat to entertainment value. For a figure as larger than life as Annie Oakley, it's easy to imagine how her story could be stretched. The power of celebrity also plays a role. When someone is famous, everything about them becomes magnified. Their achievements are celebrated, and sometimes their past is romanticized or exaggerated. People project their own ideas onto celebrities. Annie Oakley was a strong, independent woman in a time when that was unusual. People might have seen her as a rebel, and perhaps a rebel might get into trouble, thus needing a pardon. But she wasn't that kind of rebel. She rebelled through her skill and profession, not through criminal acts. Consider other famous historical figures. Almost all of them have myths and legends attached to them. George Washington and the cherry tree is a classic example. Paul Revere's ride is often told in a way that exaggerates his role. These stories often serve a purpose, perhaps to teach a moral lesson, or to make a figure seem even more heroic or memorable. In Annie Oakley's case, the pardon story might just be an attempt to add another layer of legend to her already legendary life. It's also possible there's some confusion with other historical events or figures. Perhaps another famous person, or a fictional character, was pardoned in a dramatic way, and over time, that story got incorrectly associated with Annie Oakley. Memory is a tricky thing. Details can merge and blend in our minds, especially when we're trying to recall something from a long time ago or something that we only heard secondhand. The reality is that Annie Oakley's story is compelling enough without needing invented drama. Her journey from poverty to international fame, her incredible skill, her breaking of gender norms, her loving partnership with Frank Butler, these are all true and powerful elements of her life. She was a true pioneer, not just as a shooter, but as a woman who carved out her own path in a very public and demanding world. The Queen Victoria connection is real, and it's an important part of Annie's story. It showed her global reach and her ability to impress even the most powerful people. But it was a meeting of performer and admirer, not a judge and a defendant. The absence of any official record, any mention in her own writings, or in the countless news articles and biographies about her, completely debunks the idea of a pardon. If such a significant event had occurred, it would have been a massive scandal or a celebrated triumph, and it would have been recorded. It simply didn't happen. Annie Oakley lived a long and impactful life. Her career with Buffalo Bill's Wild West show lasted for many years, but her performing didn't stop there. Even after leaving the show, she continued to perform and tour with other shows and in vaudeville. She was always in demand. Her name alone was a draw. Her later life was marked by a few challenges. In 1901, she was involved in a train accident that left her temporarily paralyzed. It was a serious injury, and it looked like her career might be over, but Annie Oakley was tough. She worked hard, underwent therapy, and against the odds, she recovered. She was back performing within a couple of years. This resilience just adds to her remarkable character. She wasn't someone who gave up easily. In 1903, a shocking thing happened. A yellow journalism newspaper ran a false story, claiming that Annie Oakley had been arrested for stealing trousers to support a cocaine habit. This was a complete fabrication, a malicious lie. The real woman arrested was an entirely different person, a burlesque performer who used Annie Oakley's name to avoid a fine. Annie Oakley fought back fiercely against the slander. She filed over 50 libel lawsuits against newspapers that printed the false story. She won almost all of them, recovering significant amounts of money. This incident shows her tenacity and her dedication to protecting her good name. It also further highlights how important her reputation for honesty and integrity was to her. It makes the idea of her needing a secret royal pardon even less plausible, as she was so vigilant about clearing her name from even fabricated accusations. Annie Oakley also spent a lot of time advocating for women's rights and encouraging women to learn how to shoot. She believed that shooting was a practical skill for women, useful for self-defense and for sport. She taught thousands of women how to handle firearms. She was a strong advocate for women's independence and capability, showing through her own life that women could excel in fields traditionally dominated by men. She truly was ahead of her time in many ways. She continued performing well into her 60s. Her skill never really diminished. Even in her later years, she could still amaze audiences with her sharpshooting. She lived with her husband, Frank Butler, until her death in 1926 at the age of 66. Frank died just 18 days later. Their bond was truly exceptional. Annie Oakley's legacy is much more than just her shooting skill. She became an American icon. She represented self-reliance, determination, and the idea that anyone, no matter their background, could achieve greatness through talent and hard work. She was a pioneer for women in sports and entertainment. Her story has been told and retold in books, movies, and stage plays, most famously in the musical Annie, Get Your Gun. Her influence on popular culture is huge. Her name is synonymous with being an excellent shot. When someone says, "You're no Annie Oakley," they mean you're not a good shooter. When they say, "She's an Annie Oakley," they mean she's very accurate. Her name has become part of the language. So, to come back to the original question about the pardon from the Queen, it's clear that this is just one of those stories that got made up along the way. Annie Oakley met Queen Victoria. She impressed Queen Victoria, but she was never pardoned by her because she never needed to be. Her life was extraordinary enough without any added fiction. Her real story of a poor girl who became a global superstar through sheer talent and determination, and who fought to protect her name and empower other women, is far more inspiring and true. She didn't need a royal pardon to cement her place in history. Her own achievements did that all by themselves.